Uh, Hello, everyone. I'm Choroba from Prague, and I'm going to tell you how to run a Plack application on a server. So, motivation. I'm not going to go into details about why Plack and why not CGI, because this has been discussed many times elsewhere. So let's skip that. And for those who don't know, Plack is just something that makes it possible to host web pages in a more modern way than what we used before. The usual situation in the past was that you had a web hosting somewhere, and you depended on the people there to provide you with Perl and all your modules. And the problem is that nowadays Perl is often not supported at all. But even if it is, you cannot run a compiler, and so it's impossible to compile access modules. You need to ask the admins to compile them for you, and if they say no, there's no way. You cannot upgrade Perl. You depend on the version that's provided for you, so you cannot use those shiny new features like try. So that's one thing that's problematic with web hosting. So maybe someone decides to run a server at home, but it has its drawbacks as well, because your ISP might not guarantee a static IP address to you, which is, for example, my case. I can pay several euros a month to get it, but I don't see a reason. And moreover, I don't want to have a server at home running all the time. It could be quite noisy and consumes electricity and so on. So the solution is to rent a virtual server somewhere. You then have full control of the configuration and install dependencies. And for example, I went with a company that provides very cheap hardware. They provide some other options as well, but I pay 53 euros a year, including a domain, which is not really that much. So, and for experimenting, the cheapest hardware is more than enough. But there is a little scary side to it, because you are now responsible for keeping the operating system up to date and keeping the machine secured. So when I ordered the service, I was able to select the operating system on the virtual machine. This was offered to me. For some of these Linux distributions, there were several versions. And if you go with none, then you can upload your ISO image of the system and use whatever you like. But you might be asked by the admins for a proof of the license, that you are entitled to install it. I selected OpenSUSE because that's what I'm using at home. But you can see that it's quite, there are many choices. Okay, so how to install Perl and modules and then run the application. So a good advice, I think, is to create a new user to run the application and not run it as root. Root is the user that you should only use for system administration and nothing else. You can then compile your own Perl or use the system Perl with locallib, so you don't mess with the system tools written in Perl. And then you can just use your favorite cpan client to install any modules you need, access or not. And sometimes you might need to use root to install development packages for C dependencies for some of the libraries that, or modules that interface lower level libraries, or you can compile them from the source code yourself without using root. You should register a domain if you want to share your application with wider public. And in most cases, it's already included in the service, or you pay a few euros more. But when I did this and I registered my domain, in that second, the server was bombarded by requests for all over the world. And it continued for a long time until I made some like preventive steps. And it was quite interesting to see how quickly it started. And there were really like several requests every second. So what to do to fortify the server? So you should start with configuring the firewall. Usually, the distribution will have something prepared for you, which will basically what you need, but make sure that you only open the ports that you really need, which probably is HTTP and HTTPS for the application and SSH for administration and deployment. I also configured the firewall to forward the ports 5000 or whatever the default is for Plack to ports 80 and 443, because these two ports are only allowed to be accessed by privileged user, and I didn't want to make myself a privileged user. So this works this way. You can easily run Plack with the default port and still make the result viewable by the outside world. Another option is to run SSHD on a non-standard port, which should help with the systems that try to get your username and password and break into the machine. Another good step is to disable root login in SSHD config. Here's the line that you should add there. And in case you screw up, which I definitely did, when I enabled the firewall, it blocked all the ports, so I wasn't able to connect in any way. Unfortunately, what the provider provides is an emergency console, which is similar to the text console. You use a special username and password to access the console, then you should log in normally, and you can unblock the ports for the firewall and fix anything if you do it, if you screw up. Yeah. So and another thing that's probably a good idea is to use fail to ban or something similar to block traffic from suspicious IPs. Here is a graph. The horizontal axis shows days, and the vertical shows number of blocked IPs. I ran this probably 4 times a day, I guess, at that time. It was like 2 years ago. So you can see that there were sometimes about 100 blocked IPs per day. because they tried to access the server. I guess the limit at that time was set to 50, maybe, so 50 unsuccessful attempts. Yeah. And then now about the application. So I'll use my simple application I use as an example here. The application lists my Perl talks with slides. And it also can show the graph we've seen in this slide. So the application just contains a cpan file that lists the dependencies. Then it has several modules. The band graph is the one that shows the graph. I have a simple templating system. And there are two libraries I'll describe in more detail. And then there is the application itself and a small configuration file. So what I use to serve the slides, I use Plack middleware static, which is a simple thing that makes it possible to securely serve static files. So from the synopsis, you can see that you just enable static. You say that the path must match a regular expression, which means no one can get anywhere else than where the regular expression specifies. And what's the route? It means from where the files should be taken, and that's it. So what's the application itself? So I have the application itself is here. So it sets status to 200. It sets headers to HTML, and there's body that just templates. There's a title, header, and the talks are read from a config file, and that's it. And then I create this regular expression from in this module, which creates it from the config file. This is something that I'll talk about later. And then this one adds index HTML to each path that ends in a slash. And this just serves any file after the slash. So I discover, and this handles the image, and this just mounts the application itself. So why is this needed? No trailing slash. So I originally thought that this should be possible. Adding a question mark after the slash should make the slash optional. And this should allow to specify the URL without the final slash. Interestingly, it works. It shows the index, but it breaks all the relative links because the links are still resolved from the original path, from the upper directory. So in order to make it work, I wrote this small no trailing slash module, which takes the path, and if the path matches this regex, it means it's an allowed directory to browse, and there is no final slash, I return a redirect to this path slash index HTML. And then if not, I just return the original result of the application. So I didn't put it into cpan yet, and the problem is that this is kind of specific to my situation, and other people that there might be some other way how to verify that the path is correct. So there will probably be a code ref that returns something. So I need to think it out more, because it's more complex if you want to make it general. Okay, And now, if you want to enable HTTPS, the easiest way and the cheapest way is to use Let's Encrypt because it's free. And there is a module on cPen which is called crypt.le. And when you install it, you'll have this script which you can run like this, but you have to fill in your real name and domain here. And it will tell you what you should do to create the certificate. And if you do it correctly, the certificate will be created for you. And then you probably need to use some kind of web server to serve the HTTPS version, because running it with plain Plack is problematic. I originally did it, but sometimes it crashes and Plack doesn't like restart on itself, while Starman just has workers, and if a worker crashes, Starman will start another worker. So it's better to use some kind of web server that handles this. The HTTP version works okay with naked Plack, but HTTPS does not. So wrap up. To run an application on a virtual server, you need a server, you need some basic system administration skills, and to install Perl and Plack, and optionally to install crypt.le and Starman to enable HTTPS. That's it. You can find the slides, or not at the moment, but in few minutes, I'll upload the slides to this address. And interestingly, it should work even without the final slash. Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions?
Okay, well, thank you for speaking.
Thank you. How do you keep it alive when it crashes? Okay. It hasn't crashed so far since I started it since this HTTPS is running on Starman. It hasn't crashed, and the HTTP version probably could, but it hasn't. So about restarting when I deploy a new version. Yeah, I have scripts to stop and start the application, and it's really a simple one. It doesn't have any state anywhere, so it really just basically kills the servers, uploads the new code, and then restarts the application, and that's it. Of course, if you want something more complex and you need to keep state in a database or something, then you have to be more careful about this stuff.